Obviously, the name of the show is the Drive and Dish NBA podcast, but this is the one time a year where we will make an exception and intro with college basketball, as of course, March Madness is in full swing right now. If you're watching on the video, you know that I am excited because I have one, but not one, I should say, but two guests with me on the podcast, Chase Bunker and Chris Crawford. I'm going to go to CC first because let's be honest, of the three of us on this podcast right now, you by far know the most about college basketball. So we're here approaching the Sweet 16 is up next. Obviously the first first day of games, really the round of 64, just feels like Christmas morning, super exciting. Plenty of drama, a few buzzer beaters this year, not a ton, but a couple great ones. Obviously the Virginia loss probably being the most memorable, but a lot of the top dogs this year not in the tournament, or not at least advancing far in the tournament. You've got Kansas out already. Duke is out. Obviously North Carolina never even made it. But I guess really, when you talk about how the tournament's been so far, what stood out to you, would have been, I guess, kind of your best games, and, for the teams that are left, who do you like going forward as we get further along?
Well, Kev, appreciate you having me on here. And it's funny. I thought I knew college basketball. Like I thought I knew a head coach who was born and raised in a town would stay loyal to a team for many years after bringing them to much success after a 12-year stint, and after 1 year of taking them to their greatest season in the history, or the last 20 years of their program, my history of life. And then all of a sudden, leaving for a interconference rival, while at the same time having been recruiting transfers all the while, talking to the other team and taking some of those transfers
not
to the
bitter
other
at
team,
all.
which I literally just
hostility
found out.
there.
Literally just found out the transfer part about 2 minutes ago when we took a pause there. So that was a fun one to figure out. So as far as shock and awe from the NCAA tournament, yes, my head coach leaving the Providence Friars, Ed Cooley, and going to Georgetown is easily the number one shock for NBA fans. Just to put it in perspective, and for you, Kevin, sake, it would kind of have been like if Joe Mazzulla takes the Boston Celtics to the NBA Finals and wins the NBA Finals, a guy born in Providence, Rhode Island, a local guy, and after taking them and winning the NBA Finals, were to go and accept a job for the Lakers. It's just, it would never happen. You would never see it happen, and it happened. So that hurt. As far as the rest of the tournament goes, it's been a lot of fun. You mentioned that Furman, Virginia game. Shout out the Paladins. Great finish in that game. It was a ton of fun. Princeton is awesome. A 15 seed making it all the way to Sweet 16 for the second year in a row is really cool. Of course, you had a 16 seed beating a 1 seed, which is just the second time that's ever happened. So you just have that chaos, and just the year's been super compressed in college basketball this year, where you're seeing that unfold in the NCAA tournament, where you're having 16 seed and a 15 seed win these first round games. You're having 1 seeds lose earlier so far than we've seen in the past, at least almost losing as many as early in the past. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I think Houston, of course, and Alabama are still going to be the favorites. Their roads are pretty straightforward for the most part. Alabama they have a pretty nice walk towards the finals. If they don't make it to the Final Four at this point, it would be a huge, massive disappointment for them, even more so than before the tournament started. So I think they're still the clear favorite. But I think you got to look out for a team like Creighton, who the beginning of the year was a team projected to go to the Final Four, had some injuries early on, but it's now starting to get together. Just beat Baylor over the weekend. They're a good team, the deep team. And I like, of course, I'm biased towards the Big East, so naturally I mentioned them. And I like Xavier as well out of the Big East too. But it's going to be a really fun end to the Final Four, or to the end of the brackets, because I really don't think anyone is in a set place where they're going to make it to the Final Four. I think if you had to pick one team, Alabama's going to make it there, but even still, anything can happen this year. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, like I was throwing it at a wall and doing a lot of experts when I picked my bracket this year. But at least I have Alabama in, so I've got my chance to get that right. It's funny. I did tell my dad the other day when I was walking by when Xavier won their second game, I said, it feels like that is just one of the most consistent things in the world. Every March it's for Xavier. Like, they're not going to win the title necessarily. They're going to give you at least 2 tournament wins. They're going to make it interesting. May throw an upset in here on somebody once in a while. Obviously this year there are 3. So maybe they be the ones getting upset, more than, being a Cinderella type. But yeah, a 16-1 upset is obviously crazy as well, with the UMBC being the first one a few years ago against Virginia. Another heartbreak for Virginia. Like we said, pretty tough. They've got the championship at least, though. So you know, I think most people would take the 2 years of heartbreak to get a guaranteed championship every time. Chase, what about you? I mean, I guess how was your bracket looking, and you know, what stood out to you here in the first few days? Chase, you got to turn your mic on first. Wow, this is a technical. No, it's not on at all right now. I hear him talking, so we're gonna filibuster while he keeps going.
This is embarrassing for Chase.
I am surprised. It's crazy because Chase has ran my board so many times, like so many times. Is one of the best radio producers I've ever worked with. Like and he's probably thinking I'm smack talking him right now, but truly, like he really made me sound good on a lot of days when I worked in the industry. So it's kind of funny right now. I'll see if we can find anything. Maybe
okay, how about now?
There
we go. All right.
Okay,
here
so
we go.
what the hell? Okay, first off, what the hell, Zoom? I literally did not close the program and nothing changed. All we did was just click on a different room, and then all of a sudden, hey, you know what's going to change? Your microphone. Secondly, my bracket's awful. Like just like everybody else's, my bracket's absolutely garbage. So I'm a Duke fan. And I watched him at the beginning of the year.
Putting yourself out there early. Respect, by the way. Like, I'm not a Duke hater, but like, okay, just, you know, you're going to get a little bit of flack there.
Yeah, whatever. I got championships to back that up. So whatever. And so I did, for the podcast listeners, I did the suck it motion. Anyway, so I watched them early in the year and I thought, oh, this team is garbage. And all of a sudden I was watching the ACC tournament and I was texting our friend Pat Welter, who works over at WRAL, who's the sports guy over there. And I said, this Duke team is going to con their way into making me think that they're going to win it all again this year, aren't they? And he's like, yes, they're hot right now. They look substantially better than they do at the beginning of the year. And you know what? I bought into it. I said, Duke, baby, we're going all the way. And then what happened? Tennessee. Like, that's the worst part. It's you lose to Tennessee. And then I was like, okay, well, I still have Kansas. What happens next game? Bam. Kansas just gets shellacked, and all of a sudden there goes my bracket altogether. Like everything sucks. And what's even crazier is that we do this out of like as a joke. I have my wife who watches a total of 0 minutes of college basketball, you know, for shiggles. And she was the only one out of 25 people that predicted the Furman bracket. And she was essentially stop the count because she had both games right and she was atop the leaderboard. And that just ultimately proves we don't know anything with these things. Like, do you think that we all knew that FDU was just going to come in and just like beat Purdue and make it a close game against FAU of all teams? Like, nobody knows where FDU was prior to that game. Not even FDU knows where FDU is. And all of a sudden they're like, they're the 16th seed, but they're number one in our hearts because they're now that lovable underdog. In terms of who's got a good run, I think this could be the year for the Zags, but I think I've also said that for like the past 3 years and been wrong every time. I kind of look at what's ahead. It's either you got to beat UCLA, which is going to be tough, but then you have to face Arkansas or UConn. I feel like both of those are also winnable. I also have Miami. I think Miami's a sneaky good team. And I don't think they get a lot of credit for how good they are. Now, granted, number one, Houston, that's going to be tough. And to quote CC, to piggyback off his death taxes and Xavier making a Sweet 16, like they're always going to do that. Yeah. I'm waiting for the inevitable Alabama to just kind of collapse just because I'm not used to seeing Alabama like this.
I was going to say, is there a collapse? They're not used to. Obviously, they're never here. How can they collapse?
No, they're never here. That's why I'm waiting. It's like, okay, there's like the San Diego State game. It's going to be like, oh, they lose by 30 or something. Like, I'm not used to them being like, if you're to say an Alabama team's number one, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's football. And
they've been killing it this year.
They have been. They've been the best team. They're the overall number one. I'm still not used to this. Alabama's a football school. They're not a bleeping basketball school. That's going to make their fans even more indignant.
They're a deep team and they're a lot of fun to watch. They got a lot of shooters. They're a dangerous squad.
Relax. Listen, you can say kill it. You can't say they got a lot of shooters. Hang on. I'm not letting you get that off twice.
They're a dangerous squad.
We are not doing that tonight. But no, I mean, I do. You're right, though. I think the team is loaded. They're really, they're going to make the run at it.
Tennessee and Kansas State are also fun. Kansas State has the kid Marquise Noel, who's a little 5'8" point guard, who is a ton of fun to watch. He might be one of the most exciting passers in college basketball. If you haven't got a chance to watch him out, I mean, Short King for sure. But to Chase's point about brackets and just us not knowing anything, last year, Maggie, my wife, filled out a bracket based on mascots and who would win in a battle, like just based on that sort of thing.
Okay.
And won our bracket challenge. Yeah. And so this year, we decided she decided to go with the Scrabble bracket. And it's not doing great. It's not doing awful, but it has Xavier as winning the whole thing. So it's still alive, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, look, you got
Emily said to me, where's Furman? And I said, I don't know. She's like, well, I'm going to pick them anyway.
Greenville, South Carolina, baby. You can't, you forgot about the FCS team that beat UCF in their 0-12 season.
I like to forget about that. I knew it exists. It's not like I didn't know the school existed. I just didn't know where it was located.
I didn't know where it existed. I have no shame. I got to be honest. Shout out to Furman, though. And Greenville, South Carolina, like wins a lot of awards for best small town in the U.S. And our
little town.
Sam Albuquerque lives around.
I almost went there for my honeymoon just because I heard it was like a really fun area.
That's where my sister went to Furman. So that's the only,
oh, okay.
I picked them in most of my brackets. Very good 3-point shooting team. And the way that Virginia plays their press up, pin up defense, if they get a team that can shoot against them and can knock down threes, it's like their worst possible opponent to face.
I thought this was going to be the year that Boise State actually wins a playoff game, but like Leon Rice has that team like built for first round elimination. Round of 68, yeah, you're going to get eliminated there. Round of 64, yeah, you're going to get eliminated.
I just really want to see Hofstra in the tournament one time, and I'm definitely not bitter at all that the only year they won the CAA since 2002 was the year the tournament got canceled because of COVID. I'm definitely not upset at all. Definitely not bitter that they flamed out against UNCW and didn't get the finale against College Charleston. I'm just going to be over.
That's all right. That's all right. At least your head coach didn't have a slogan, us, we, together, family, and then left.
I feel like everyone should know that in college sports now, though. At least, like I appreciate
not in the conference.
Oh, CCI.
You don't start the negotiations during the season.
I hear you.
1.5 months ago.
I think you're expecting
so the team finds out and they go on a 5-game losing streak to close out this season while you're taking meetings with players who are transferring during the NCAA tournament and convincing them to go with you to Georgetown that no one else knows is happening because you're still the coach of Providence and have a game against Kentucky in a day.
You know, you're 100% right. Like all of that is correct. I'm just saying, look, I gave up expecting ethics from college sports a long time ago. We just know how this works, unfortunately. Every time you think there's an ounce of loyalty, an ounce of the hometown discount, you know, and I say this to say that I hope that Speedy Claxton at Hofstra is the exact opposite of all that, because I hope he stays forever. Welcome, everybody, to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Joining me today, like we said, 2 guests on the show. First up, if you're watching, I'm in the middle right now of the screen. So on top of me, we've got Chris Crawford, Assistant Program Director at WSB Radio in Atlanta. CC, what's happening?
Not much. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, always a pleasure.
Talk.
Yeah, of course. You listen, I know how it is. We'll get some Spurs talking maybe a little bit later as well. We'll wobble for Wemby. Below me, Chase Bunker, WOKV reporter in Jacksonville. Listen, this has been a weird start to the podcast, but he's also the host of Bunker's Burning Hot Take podcast, which, I mean, with some of your burning hot takes, that's on brand, right? Like, isn't this exactly the perfect intro that fits the theme of your pod, Chase?
That I'm below you? I'm the C in the human centipede?
No, I didn't mean to. No, I'm in the middle. I think, if anything, I mean, is it the worst for me?
Yeah, the B is the worst position. I think Daniel Tosh even came to that conclusion that the B is the worst.
I never watched that movie, and I don't.
Neither did I.
I know the plot, obviously, at this point. Like, I've read it, but there's just zero desire at all where I think I need to see that. I'm all right. You know what I mean? So, like, I get it. Other people can have that.
I haven't been on this podcast in a while, but don't we talk basketball? And
yeah, we do.
It seems to be.
I mean, we technically mentioned a B, so I mean, put the B in B ball.
You know,
in this 3-way.
I don't know what that means at all, but you know, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so really, I mean, we're going to go kind of all over the place. And really the best part of running the 3-man weave is you get to just kind of, you know, you never know. And when you have guests, how the discussion goes. Like we have a little bit of an outline here, a couple of things I want to talk about for sure. And we're going to start at the top of the Eastern Conference because there's been, you know, a little bit of a shakeup recently. I swear this is not a ploy for me to talk Sixers. Really though, because I mean it's more about the top of the conference in general, because I'm coming to this realization with all the parity in the West, and I really want to get your guys' take on this, but I would be remiss to say that the Sixers have won 8 in a row. They have the number 1 net rating here over the past few weeks. Obviously, Milwaukee's been cruising as well, 51 wins, 20 losses on the season, 7-3 in their last 10. And you know, Boston, everyone's saying Boston's on a skid, and I know they are a little bit, but still 49-23, 5-5 in their last 10. The Sixers and Celtics are tied at 2-3 right now. The Celtics, of course, have that tiebreaker. The Celtics have actually played 2 more games than the Sixers, 1 win, 1 loss. So, you know, obviously equivalent to 1 full game there. And then you've got Cleveland sitting at 45-28, probably a little too far out to make any real push at this point. I mean, they could mathematically, but it sure feels like they're going to be locked into that 4 seed as long as they handle their business. But I mean, you know, I want to ask you guys, as you take a look at the 3 teams here, like, I don't know, are we at a point where do we trust these teams more than we, and specifically, I guess I'm talking about the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Celtics, namely more even the latter 2, the Bucks and the Celtics, because we've seen them here in these positions before. Do you guys trust them more than really anyone in the West at this point? I mean, it feels like the West has been full of parity. It's kind of up in the air. Every team has a flaw or two. You know, Chase, I'll start with you this time. You know, who do you have? And I guess when you look at these 3 teams, you know, where does your faith meter lie in each of them?
I usually get suckered around this time where I keep thinking that Philly's going to actually like break the mold and actually like take the next step. The thing is that it's not that I don't have faith in like Joel Embiid or James Harden or anybody else on that team. It's that I don't have faith in Doc Rivers. And I feel like Doc Rivers is going to just somehow coach that team down. I would say out of all of them, I do have faith in Milwaukee, just because like Milwaukee doesn't have the implosion factor, which is, you're probably saying like, what the heck is that? Like, I don't see a downward spiral when I see Milwaukee. I've seen Philly kind of go in a downward spiral in bits, but it's usually injury related. Boston, they just go through these things where it's just like, they will play great against good teams, but then they just suck against bad teams. And I don't know which Boston we're going to get at this point. Like this is going to be the ultimate test for Joe Mazzulla. Like, is he actually going to get this team on straight? Because I feel like they're probably more unbalanced more than anything. I was originally going to say Cleveland has no shot of actually making top 3, but then I look at the rest of their schedule. Do you guys know who they play the rest of the year?
But you got in front of me, so round on wall,
yes.
Hit me.
Brooklyn twice, Orlando twice, Houston, Atlanta, New York, Indy, Charlotte. They very well could win out, and that is a possibility.
Like, I don't know if I have them winning out, but I mean, it's weak for sure. Like their hardest game.
Even still, how many games is that?
I mean, that's still, I just backed out.
I think it's 10. Most teams have about 12 to 13
9
games left.
Right. So they would need the Celtics or
the Sixers
to lose like 7 of their last 9.
Right. And that's basically my thing. Like Cleveland does have a really favorable schedule. Like you said, the Knicks are the only ones. And I mean, Brooklyn, and those are important games for them to make sure they have home court, because Brooklyn has stayed pesty. Like they're around hanging in 6. Obviously the Knicks are sitting in 5 right now. I think they're pretty to get out of the play-in, but like Atlanta's going to be fighting for play-in position as well. So, but no, I think Cleveland's is really good. I think they're going to win a first round series for sure. I do think they're a step behind the other 3 teams that we mentioned. But I also, like I said, I think they're probably better than everybody below them at this point. No one in the play-in really, even Miami, like every time I want to believe, and we talked about this a little bit, Justin and I last week, every time I want to turn the corner on Miami, it's everybody else. It's not Jimmy, obviously. Jimmy Butler's great. I mean, he's been phenomenal. I think he's leading the NBA in PER since the All-Star break. Like, we know what he does come playoff time, but I just have way less faith in Miami's depth than I have in the past. Like Bam is playing great. Tyler Hero is playing pretty well for the most part, but Max Strus hasn't been as reliable as he was last year. Kind of the same thing with Gabe Vincent. And I'm just not, I'm not trusting them the way that I have in the past.
I think that this is why seeding is somewhat important, because I do think that as much as, I agree with you where I don't really trust them as much in the past, but I also still fear them as much.
I don't want Jimmy. I fear Jimmy.
Right?
That's who I fear.
So as sitting in that 2 spot, you're looking probably at facing maybe the Heat in the first round, like they're looking in that 7 slot. So I think that while it's tough to be, going on the streak that Boston is going on right now and kind of going the other way, they've been kind of the most consistent team all year up until this point. Like the Sixers had a little slide earlier on in the year, and the Bucks had their drought earlier on in the year, and they're all both kind of going humming now. The Celtics just never hit that slump a little bit, and now they're hitting that slump. And I think that, it's probably a better time now to hit it if they can kind of get it on track over the last like 3 to 5 games of the year. Like they still have a few games to kind of mess around and not be the same Boston Celtics we saw from the beginning of the year. But I think as long as they kind of turn it around and start figuring things out and close out the year strong, that, the Sixers and the Bucks are all the best teams in the East. And I would just be concerned if the Celtics or Sixers faced off with the Heat. And I think outside of that, the 2 of the other 3 teams are pretty much set to make a solid run.
Yeah, I think if either of these teams are serious, though, then they should be beating Miami. This particular version of Miami, but you're right.
They should.
Jimmy is great, and he could. No. He could swing a series just by himself. And come playoff time, like as well as Brooklyn is playing right now, as scrappy as those guys are playing, you obviously don't have as much faith in them. But give them credit; like they've hung around. I think obviously realistically all these teams will be favorites to win their first round series. The Bucks are just healthy now. I think that's been the biggest thing, is we haven't seen the Bucks fully healthy all season, and it just feels like they've got everybody back now. Like Chris Middleton is getting into a rhythm. Drew Holiday has just been dominating fourth quarters, playing great defense like he always does. Brook Lopez is a contender for defensive player of the year. So like they to me, like they were my preseason pick, and I'm not really backing off of that. I still feel good about that. Obviously also helps that they employ the best player in the NBA on any given night. But you're right though about Boston. Like Boston's consistency, I think their skid here is being, I think their exaggeration is highly demised, or demise is highly exaggerated, I should say. They have a weird problem recently with not being able to close games, like where they'll have these big leads. Like their loss to Utah the other night was a prime example. Like they were up, I think 20 some points in that game. And then they're just closing lineups haven't been as reliable. Rob Williams has been hurt, but I don't know that maybe having the dual big lineup with him and Al Horford has been the best thing in the world for the Celtics either. But you're right, to your point, like for the first, 2/3, 3/4 of the season, they were pretty much the best team night in and night out. And so it's hard for me to just discount them because they're on a little bit of a slide right now.
Especially when you're looking at a rookie head coach too, and it also shout out, a Rhode Islander who understands loyalty, because Ainge went to him for that assistant job years ago. And Joe Mazzulla had promised his high school team that he was committed to them and came back and coached them. And a couple of years later, Ainge rewarded him and offered him the position again. Just something for, a Rhode Island coach to think of when it comes to loyalty here and there.
Did you see that?
But seriously though, as a rookie head coach, the season that he had to start is very impressive. And I think you're right in the fact that because of the timing of this stumble, people are blowing it out of proportion, when it's like, really, the fact that they didn't have a little stumble up to this point is incredibly impressive.
Oh, wait, you're in Atlanta, real quick, not to pivot, but this kind of goes back in college basketball. How about Damon Stoudemire getting the Georgia Tech job?
Yeah, that's awesome. I used to always serve up threes when I was playing basketball as a kid growing up. So seeing him getting a professional job at Georgia Tech too, which is a program that desperately needs it. I mean, you've got Kennesaw State out recruiting Georgia Tech in the state of Georgia. And that's probably something that shouldn't happen, but it did.
Damn.
So Georgia Tech is a program that could be great. I mean, remember Jared Jack? I mean, Chris Bosh. Like, I mean, they had a great program back in the day, and it just kind of all fell apart. So I love Damon Stoudemire in the same way that I love Speedy Claxton at Hofstra. I love Damon Stoudemire at Georgia Tech.
Well, I love just the fact that we're kind of and
Serving up the
obviously this is
three.
with all of us being in our 30s now too. We're at the age where the guys that we watched are starting to get these real life coaching. Like even somebody like Sam Cassell, who I mean, I've been beating the drum for him to. I mean, Chase, to your point, like I want Sam Cassell to be the damn Sixers head coach, but apparently he's getting looks now for the Temple head coaching gig. And it's like, again, these are guys that, I remember Sam being a part of that 01 Bucks team that went to the conference finals and, obviously doing the infamous celebration now, but it's cool to see these guys starting to get gigs.
It's also
I hate Sam Cassell.
Ooh, yeah,
Why?
he looks like an alien.
Yes, one, he looks like an alien. Thank you for taking I was about to say that. But two, because I'm still angry at that Bucks team because they beat the Orlando Magic, who are trying to take an 8 seed, but all of a sudden, I think it was Sam Cassell. It was like one of those George Karl Bucks teams, and they just shattered. And I remember seeing the headline for the Florida Today, and it just said big bold letters, heartbreaker. And I haven't forgiven him since.
What's up? I get it.
The Joe Mazzulla one feels weird for me though, only because we went to the same high school and he graduated the year before I was a freshman.
Yeah.
So, I remember watching him in the state championship.
Yeah, he's real young.
I remember him coming back and when I was a freshman in high school, meeting him when he was a freshman in college. So it just feels weird. I'm just like, that guy shouldn't, that's awesome. But just makes me feel old and unaccomplished.
We already did your resume earlier in the podcast. Have some faith in yourself.
What part of the resume said head coach of the Boston Celtics on it?
That's the way I felt when Sean McVay took the job over at the Rams, where it's like, oh, this guy's a 30-year-old. I'm like, really? What have I done with my life?
McVay's talking about retiring. The dude's like 4 years older than us, I feel like.
I don't think he's 4. I think he's younger than us.
Yeah. Well,
I'm on it.
Know.
I'm on it on the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
I think no, he's
37, so he's just a few years older than us.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, a little bit. Either way, though, definitely living the dream. Talk about retirement. So I do want to get into a pair of injuries. I want to go out west. I guess actually, I don't want to move off this fully yet because I did say this and I don't want to just let this go. The way they're playing right now, and again, because I'm there with you too. Like I had a whole podcast about Sixers gloom. Justin and I did a few weeks ago. I have concerns about their depth. I have concerns about Doc, but damn it, Joel is just so good. Every game, he just keeps getting better and better and elevating to a level that even in my biggest Joel fanhood, just didn't really think he had in him. Harden is just so I miss MVP Harden, obviously, in the sense where he could just go off and score every night. Like, I do think he's lost a step in that regard. I do give him a lot of credit for how he's molded his game this year and really just become the point god, essentially. I mean, he's averaging the most assists in the NBA right now. Like, he just puts Embiid in these positions, like left and right. He also is shooting a career high percentage from beyond the arc too, but still getting Maxey back in the starting lineup has really just reactivated him. Like I have concerns about the depth, but I think they have just enough if those three guys are going. Again, their margin of error is less than a Boston or a Milwaukee because, their guys can afford to have an off night. I go back to the Sixers and the Celtics regular season game from like 5-6 weeks ago where Tatum was horrible for like 3.5 quarters, hit the game winner in that game, but their depth kept them afloat. Malcolm Brogdon was awesome. Jaylen Brown, obviously not a depth guy, but like he's a guy who could carry your offense for entire times. Like if one of those Sixers is off, there's Tobias Harris, and then it gets, I like D'Anthony Melton a lot. I like, George Niang. We'll see if he can play in the playoffs this year, but it starts to get thin fast where you're just not there as much with Milwaukee and Boston. But I do ask, and mainly this is because Denver's been skidding as well. The Warriors have a couple injuries that they're dealing with right now. You've also got to, be here worried about Phoenix with KD, with him coming back, see what that looks like, what that adjustment is. Are those three teams, and maybe I'm being a little generous with the Sixers because they still kind of are improvement mode than me as well, but is it fair to say that Milwaukee and Boston are better than anyone in the West? Would you trust them more in a 7-game series against anyone in the West right now?
I think that it's just a toss up all around, really. It's weird because one thing is no one really wants to trust the Kings, right?
Oh yeah, Justin and I talked about this last week.
No one wants to trust them, but they're good.
No, and they keep checking boxes.
Yeah.
Fun story. I don't trust them come playoff time.
It's not, and it's reasonable because the defense is not great. Like they're 28th ranked in defense right now. They're also number one ranked in offense and running one of the best offenses the NBA's ever seen statistically right now per 100 possessions. I don't know. Like every time I keep wanting to like not be high on the Kings, they go on the road and win a big game. De'Aaron Fox goes out in another fourth quarter and balls out. Like, because Chase, I'm with you a little bit. Like I'm hard pressed to trust them in the West more than I trust Denver, given the season they've had, more than I trust Phoenix with a fully healthy KD and what I think that offense can be. But you're right. Like I said, and when I look, that road record is the biggest thing that stands out. Like the Kings are 22-13. For some perspective, the Nuggets are 18-18 on the road. The Grizzlies have only won 14 games on the road. The Suns have won 15. The Mavs have won 14. The only team that's remotely been close on the road in the West is the Clippers. And we're talking about the Clippers treading water. Like they're 19-18 on the road. It's not exactly like they're, some road warriors over here.
The West on the road is drastically worse than the East on the road. And I don't know what the deal is with that. It's very weird, but it's clear and present that there's a bunch of teams with winning records on the road in the East.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think that the Kings are the only one with the winning record in
the
West.
Only the Clippers are one game over 500 right now, but that's it. They're the only teams in the Western Conference that have positive winning records on the road. And I mean, we've talked about it too. Like Sacramento's home court advantage is great right now. Like you're telling those fans are going to be rabid having not seen playoffs since 2002. They're excited to just get there, let alone the fact you can maybe win something now.
They had like the beam chants going in Washington, D.C. the other night.
Yeah. Like
it's a fun chant.
It is a fun chant.
It's crazy how well it's worked. Like it's such a wild idea. Like they have a beam of light that they shot up into the sky. Like somebody sat in a marketing meeting, sold that, and it's now become a rallying cry for an entire city for what's now not like, this is no longer, like we said, it's past a cute story to me. Like they're going to do damage in the playoffs. It looks like.
I do think that there's maybe only a handful of cities you could do that in where it would work. Like I think you try to do the beam in other cities, they're gonna look and be like, I don't get it. That's pretty dumb. But like there's some cities where you do the beam and they're like, yo, turn that light on, that big one that goes in the air. Turn it.
It's become the perfect it's the perfect storm and combo of everything happening, right? Like it's the roster that they went and got and how well it fits. Like I was talking about it earlier with my one friend who's a big Kings fan. Like De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis don't shoot the ball well, right? Like we just know that. De'Aaron Fox is a great athlete. He gets to his slashing lanes, and Sabonis just dominates the paint. Like he's really old school in that regard. The Kings just went out and had a hell of an offseason and just surrounded them with all the shooters you could. And it's working out. Like they get out, they play fast. And more importantly, you just like sometimes your team chemistry and a vibe matters. Like we saw it with Boston really at the end of last year. Like once they locked in January, how it just felt like their chemistry was unbeatable. And I know they fell short, but it still carried them all the way to the finals. Like we're still at a hard TBD with the Kings, but I wouldn't want to sleep on them and I wouldn't want to play them.
Well, I mean, it's funny that I feel like there was always that offseason. Like it seemed like every year they would always just go and get shooters, and it never worked out for Sacramento. And then all of a sudden, they just blossom. But here's the thing, though: if everything stands the way they are, who do you trust in a 7-game series? Sacramento or Golden State? Because that's what they're destined to play right now.
Does Golden State have Wiggins, and do they have Gary Payton, or do they have their current version?
I would say Wiggins would probably be back by playoffs, right?
God damn, it's Golden State, and I hate myself for saying this because I don't want it to be Sacramento, but it's Golden State.
But that's also the thing with the West, though, too, is that while we said the road records are worse and all that stuff, there's still teams that are deeper in the West I'm more scared. I mean, it's Golden State, but I mean, in the same sense, it's the Clippers, it's the Suns with Kevin Durant, it's the Mavs with Luka and Kyrie if they're healthy. Like I'm not as scared of the 4 through 7 seed in the East as I am in the West.
I agree with that part, and I agree with every team you mentioned except the Mavs. I think the Mavs are on like serious season going south. I mean, that I will give Maxi Kleber his credit. That shot against the Lakers, low-key may have saved it. And I mean, it's tough right now because obviously, like, Kyrie's missed on and off games. The big thing is Luka. Luka's missed the last 5 games, and including their game that they're going to play tonight. But I mean, this is a season that has seen them like plummet into play-in game position to the point where they're battling it out to just get in, period. We're talking about with the likes of Utah, who obviously wasn't expected to play for much of anything this year. A team like Oklahoma City, who has a lot of good young players, but is still, kind of pushing to get there and don't have their number 2 overall pick, who hasn't played all year, and Chet Holmgren. It'd be a massive disappointment, obviously, taking the swing that they've got. And I don't know, like it's tough because it needs more time to gel with Luka and Kyrie. Like that's always the deal with big in-season moves like this, right? But I don't know that they'll get it. And
Well, here,
I just don't trust their depth at all either.
Well, here's the crazier thing. Like from 4 to 11 is separated by 3.5 games. Like there is very well the possibility, like we're talking about the standings now, like we still have 10 games left and there's so much that can just change. Like there's still the possibility that the Lakers could go on a roll and possibly like be a 6th seed. The Jazz could be going, especially with Minnesota now losing Anthony Edwards. Like there's still
and the addition of Chris Dunn.
Yes. And so, by the way, where did Chris Dunn play?
Oh, that would be Providence.
Oh, okay.
Loyally for all 4 years.
All 4 years. Wow, that's a loyal guy.
He's a loyal guy.
You would think that they would teach. I thought they teach Providence or loyalty in Providence.
Yeah, so much loyalty. Most loyal place on earth.
Us, we together, family.
But
fraud.
It's crazy because you're right though, Chase, because I think like Portland is the only one of those teams recently in the West that's really trended out. Like everybody is still battling there because like the Lakers are far from a shoe. And you're right. I mean, the only like Sacramento and Memphis, it feels like are going to jockey for 2 and 3. Denver is pretty locked into 1 unless they really blow the end of the season. And like we can talk about Denver in a little bit. I'm not quite hitting the panic button, but I'm starting to get a little bit more concerned. And I've been a big Denver truther. So like I do not like the Jokic Embiid debate becoming so toxic is really tough for me because like obviously I'm the biggest Embiid fan in the world, but I'm also a huge Denver truther. Like I've been for a couple of years, been like waiting for them to get healthy, wait for them to get healthy, wait for them to get healthy. And they're healthy and they're kind of letting me down a little bit. They're supposed to be cruising to this number 1 seed, but yeah, I mean, really the play-in game position is going to be something to watch. Yeah. And Anthony Edwards, I mean, he's out of a boot. At least that was, I think, the relief for everybody when he went down. And obviously this is just, it feels cruel for a Wolves team that finally looked like was going to get fully healthy again because Karl Anthony Towns obviously hasn't played in months now either. But again, I mean, Chase, you talked about the bottom of the Western Conference. Like that's in that play-in race right now. I mean, Minnesota's holding 9. I mean, statistically, they're right there with Utah right now. The Pelicans are hanging around. You don't know what Zion's going to do. But yeah, I mean, this is a situation where it's wide open and every one of these games matters. Like we said, we've got anywhere from about 10 to 14 left, depending on the team. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I mean, again, without Anthony Edwards' almost continued ascendance has been the story of the season, right? For the Wolves, like I know that Gobert trade has been rough, but Ant's almost been so great that he's covered up a lot of it. If they don't have Ant, I struggle to see them making the play-in game. Like even when I mean, they're running out of time to get Towns back. Even if he adjusts, mm-hmm. like you lose 2-3 games here and all of a sudden you may be as far out of it as Portland looks like now.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Like Anthony Edwards being great this season has kind of masked the whole Gobert trade not being that effective, really. And I feel like if he was just a hair worse, we'd be killing Minnesota right now.
Oh, but no, yeah, we already are. Don't worry. No, we are. Ant covers up a lot.
It could be a lot worse. We're killing him now. Oh, yeah. It's Minnesota. It's one of the most garbage franchises in all of sports. It's one of the most poorly run. And like, that's the thing. Like, it's one of the most poorly run. And like, James Dolan can look at it and go, thank you. Thank you for being so trash because all the eyes would usually be on me. So anyway, like, yeah, like, here's the thing. Like, they're 13 games behind first place. And they're also like tied with the Lakers, the Jazz, and the Pelicans. Like you said, they could all easily just move up. They're only like a half game within each other. And 3 of those teams are tied. So it's like, it's almost as if you want to say, hey, Karl, are you feeling at least like 80% good, 75 maybe is like, are you going to make that push? Or is this finally going to like, you go to Gobert and say, hey, you got to step your bleep up, man. Like, we're going to have to go to you right now. Because other than that, like, if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't come back within the next few games, like just the next few games, their playoff hopes are done.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they can tread water for a little bit, right?
No, they're they have the same record as the Lakers, and they also have the same record as the Jazz, who are currently out. And you also are a half game ahead of the Pelicans. So just even if you lose one of those games, like you're already like treading the, hey, I might not make it to the playoffs. And let's take a look at their schedule real quick. They're playing New York right now as we're recording this. They have Atlanta, Golden State, Sacramento, Phoenix, Lakers. So that's a key one. Portland, who's bad. We don't know what Brooklyn is going to be. And then San Antonio and New Orleans. Their final game is New Orleans, who very well could be the 10th seed.
That would be fun. That actually would be, oh, could you imagine that? I mean, it'd be the play-in almost.
Yes.
Obviously that's a nightmare.
What's funny is I'm just looking up the scores of the games right now as well. I've got the Bulls and Sixers game on. It's 69-68 at the end of the third quarter.
Nice.
Okay.
The Timberwolves are up 79-70 at halftime on the Knicks right now.
Oh, they need it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
like, I'm rooting for the most competitive race in the Western Conference. Like, that's the thing. The Knicks are kind of chilling. They can take a game or two on the chin.
79 halftime points is a lot of halftime points. And to have 70 scored against you is also a lot of points.
I mean, that's been the NBA for a lot of this year, though, right? Like, it's become a try. I know guys are starting to D up now.
That's been the thing with the Timberwolves too all year. It's not so much about Rudy Gobert not being there offensively. It's the fact that while he still gets blocks, his defense has been so bad.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what has made it even worse. I mean, like, the Gobert trade was always going to be tough because unless they went out and won, like, Minnesota just mortgaged their future. And Ant and Karl Anthony Towns are both great, but that's the reality, is everyone knew they mortgaged this future when they went all in on to go get Gobert. And you're right. I mean, you never really expect him to be an offensive guy. Like, you know, he's never certainly going to be Cat. He's not going to be Embiid. He's not going to be Jokic, but he was at least elite defensively. That in itself has plummeted this year. Like, when you're on the first year of that contract and what he's known for, like what's essentially been his calling card and what's made him great over these past few years and what's had these legions of people on the internet defending him, especially from an advanced stats perspective, like when that's falling off a cliff in the first year, like, and of course it doesn't help as well that like Walker Kessler's playing phenomenal over in Utah. Like, he already looks like a hit right there when it's like, I think there are people in Minnesota. And again, I'm really not trying to just rub this in and make it cruel or unusual, but it's like, what would Minnesota just be like if they had Walker Kessler? Like, it feels like they wouldn't be any worse than they would right now.
It's the precipitous fall for Gobert too, right? You know, like, it's a guy who, you know, even 3 years ago, people were saying, like, I mean, this is a guy who you could build a team around. You know, like that wasn't.
Well, they did. I mean, the Jazz paid him and Donovan Mitchell to be it. Like, that's what they did. They built the core around.
Oh, I mean, the Miami Heat were considering trading Bam Adebayo. Like, people were talking about trading Bam for Rudy at one. You know, this guy was at one point considered arguably a top 5 player in the league in the sense of where people held him in regard of how he played, and I mean, now is anyone will like? I mean,
so you didn't have him top 5, right?
God, no, of course
not. Okay. I was like, I like Rudy, but I'm like, defensively,
but
like,
wasn't there one year where he finished in like the top 5 of MVP voting or something?
It might have been the year the Jazz were the 1 seed. Like, the Jazz were the number 1 overall in the West for sure. I don't know if they had the most wins.
And even still, I'm just speaking, you know, candidly about it in the sense that they're, you know, the bloggers and things and people who would argue online that it would make the case Rudy Gobert is a top 5.
And I do think like Rudy is elite defensively, was, and in a way, like a lot of what those advanced stats guys, like, I'm not going to dump on them entirely either. Like, a lot of what they were saying, a lot of what Rudy Gobert doesn't show up on a stat sheet. That also just doesn't change the fact that I would never in a zillion years have done the move that the Timberwolves have done. And that's just what it comes down to for me. Like, I think Gobert is definitely like an NBA caliber starter, and you can for sure play him on good teams, but I'm not at a point where, like, I don't know, like the Timberwolves just took their biggest problem. Like, their house was infested with ants, and instead of calling it a Terminator, they just like nuked it essentially. And I don't really know why. Like, it just was unnecessary.
I think a Terminator would also nuke it, though.
Yeah, you're right. Exterminator.
You know, I think an exterminator.
Right. It would be cool if a Terminator
but the Terminator would
like,
also
kind of wild.
But would also probably blow things
up.
Would
a Terminator or the nuke cost more than which would cost more first round picks?
Yeah. I don't know, but it was one of those things too when that trade happened where we all thought like, all right, let's see. Like, I don't think that Rudy Gobert is the one to pick out of this duo here and give that much up
Well,
for.
they
but
needed
we'll
interior
see.
defense. Like, I understand from a fit perspective why Minnesota needed to boost their interior defense. I think Memphis really, like, that was when Memphis beat them last year in the playoffs. Like, that was the thing. You had guys like Ja driving at will, but you just overcompensated, heavily overcompensated.
Do you
By
think,
the way, I
Yes.
want to say, because go to your original point about MVP voting. So Rudy Gobert was never like high up, but he still was getting votes. Like in 2018, the 2018-2019 season, he was tied for 11th MVP voting with LeBron James. The season after that, he was, I'm sorry, this thing was loading. He wasn't in it on that, but then for the 2020-2021 season, he was 10th. So he was getting MVP nods. He wasn't like top 5 or anything, but he was still getting looks.
He also was radically better back then, which is crazy.
Well, one of those was just a year ago, but I wonder if part of that is the front office looking at what the Kings did. Remember, because when they traded Halliburton to get Sabonis, we all were like, this is Kings gonna Kings, you know, like classic Kings move. This is gonna make them so much more worse. Like, this isn't the move. Halliburton was the young guy they got to keep, sort of thing. And it worked out really well. And I wonder if the Timberwolves kind of saw the direction the Kings were going at the end of last year with that Sabonis move and thought, hey, maybe if we go and get our big in the same way that they got theirs. Like, I don't know. It's just
crazy too, because that'd be weird to base it off of from last year. Like, Sabonis was good for them last year, but like, this has been the year where it's really worked out, obviously. Like, Sabonis has always been a good player. Like, he was a good player. They got that from Indy. Like, people, and it's crazy because it has become such a win-win trade. And I'm a huge Tyrese Halliburton guy. Like, I think Hallie's a stud. There were a huge part of me that initially when that trade went down, and again, I like Sabonis a lot, but I was like, man, Hallie's going to be so good long-term that it may not matter. But to Sacramento's point, like, they're the number 2 team in the Western Conference right now. Sabonis has been a huge part of that. And more importantly, I think letting Hallie go, again, why I'm so high on him long-term, I think that may have enabled De'Aaron Fox to become just better once he was like the certified star of the show. Like, they kind of had that backcourt jam there a little bit. And so it has. It's certifiably worked out for both teams. Like, Sacramento is obviously here, like we talked about, in a position to really contend in the Western Conference. Indy's got a certified young gunner for the next few years. Like, I think Halliburton is going to be good for a long time.
Can we not talk about Magic legend Domantas Sabonis, please? I'm still bitter.
That's the one that you're still bitter about among all of them?
I'm bitter about a lot of things. I am a very vengeful person.
No, no way. There's no way we could tell that.
Oh, yeah. Like, every time I hear about Domantas Sabonis' success, I think of, oh, that's right. We drafted him for 7 minutes. And what did we give up? Him and Victor Oladipo for Serge Ibaka. Buddy, and not even a full year of Serge Ibaka, half a year of Serge Ibaka.
Buddy, we gave up Mikal Bridges for virtually nothing, for no reason. Like, you want to talk about, like, we can all do this for each of our squads.
Oh, we could.
That's borderline is unforgivable, is letting Jimmy walk, honestly, like, in terms of just the sheer unnecessariness of it. And I don't even know if that's a word, but it was like, whatever. It was, anyway, you could tell when I'm running out of words, we're out of trouble there. We need to pivot and move on. Lonzo Ball, I am so sad for Lonzo Ball, because he is now here on the cusp of having his 3rd knee surgery, and we knew this was going to happen, that he was going to be shut down for the rest of the year. Like, this really isn't a surprise to anyone, but I mean, the reports are just brutal for him. I mean, they're talking about him not being able to like walk and run fully yet off the court. Like, forget NBA basketball level, like daily activities, like getting around the house type deal. His knee condition has gotten so bad here. Sham said with this 3rd surgery that best case scenario is they get him back on the floor in the 2024 season. So we're already talking about punting next year too, which I think at this case is probably the right idea. But I mean, this is a guy who really was coming into his own here in Chicago. And I mean, forget about the impact on the Bulls. Like, I think Lonzo was starting to play the best basketball of his career. Like, it had really just every season been getting better. The 3-point shot was improving. Obviously, was just a phenomenal passer from day one. I don't want to say, because it's all been one injury. But it reminds me of our pal Jonathan Isaac, right? Where it's just become, he's become more of a concept at this point, sadly. And, we're all rooting for Lonzo Ball. We all hope he gets back on the floor, but it's really tough. It's hard to see him again. You got to worry about your life with everything off the court. But the fact that, again, when my injury articles start with that he's having trouble running and jogging, we're a long, long way off from NBA basketball.
It seems like, I mean, it's unfortunate too, but this happens every now and then in the league, and when it's big young time players and stuff, it almost is. There's almost always two guys tied together at the same time, right, or around the same time, or whatever it might be. Like Brandon Roy and Greg Oden. I know Brandon Roy is a little bit before Greg Oden, but still kind of along the same 10 years.
Same franchise. That's the brutal part. The same franchise,
right? But and then you look at you've got Jonathan Isaac and now Lonzo Ball, just two guys who haven't been in the league long, but feel like they were both unicorns in the sense of how they played their positions and what they brought to the game. And we're both in positions where it was like looking like we're finally gonna maybe unlock this full potential of both of these guys and just see how incredible they could be at full caliber at the NBA level. And unfortunately, the injuries have just stopped both of them right when they've been kind of getting to a point where we're like, yes, let's go. So it sucks, but it's something that we see happen every now and then. And I hope they both come back, but it just seems more and more like both of these guys are destined to kind of maybe follow that path of just being the kind of what could have been guys, which is always it's always the worst, because it always seems to happen to, really fun and exciting and unique players, unfortunately.
Well, no, the squads you mentioned. My bad, Chase. Go ahead.
It's okay. And especially just with the knee injuries as a whole, like it's always scary when it's the knee. I think we all, like when we kind of saw like the injuries to Derrick Rose, we just kind of were just like, there was this sense of fear that loomed around all basketball fans, like what's going to happen with this guy. And I know we do celebrate it whenever someone does successfully come back, but it's sad because it seems like it doesn't get any better from here. It just gets worse. And it's one of those, I feel like Lonzo might just need a full year to just recover, which is why he's missing next year. But like, I thought the same thing I thought Greg Oden. I also wonder, like, what is causing these knee issues? And part of me thinks, and this is and I'm not saying this as a joke, I'm legitimately asking this, because he was growing and still developing at that time. What effect did wearing those big baller shoes have on his body?
Did he wear them in a game?
He wore those in a few times, like I think his rookie year. I think he wore them the first 2 years.
I think he might. I don't think he wore them long enough to have any. Like, I have to go full disclosure. I have to go back and do research, but I don't think he wore them long enough. But
it was affecting his leg, like it was affecting his ankles, and eventually it just evolved up to his leg at this point. And I'm wondering, like, did that affect his healing process to where it started with the ankle and it kind of shifted up? And I also could just be talking about my butt medically, but still, like, could this have been a catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see, because like you said, when it's the same procedure the same injury 3 times, I should say, like this is the 3rd surgery he's having now on this knee here in the past year and a half. Like, I don't know. It's tough. You're right. It is hard to see it getting better from here. You hope it does. Obviously Brandon Roy. Oh, that's so tragic. Brandon Roy is one of my all-time NBA tragedies. He was so good. I mean, Oden, you had less playing time with, but like Brandon Roy, you at least got a little bit. He was 6-7 seasons, I think, of Brandon Roy before he really just got bad with the knee injury. He was one of them. Like, he was going to be a Hall of Famer for sure. That one will always be one of the toughest for me. Of course, it's good when you speak of Hall of Famers, talk about the greatest of all time, Michael Jordan. That was the other big news that came out in the NBA this week, is that MJ may be selling his majority share in the Hornets. Of course, from an out of basketball perspective, MJ is the only African-American owner in the league. From a basketball perspective, of course, he's owned Charlotte now here for a few years. They haven't been tremendously successful during his run. Obviously hasn't been quite the executive as he has been the player, but given what we've seen, recent sales of Phoenix, the sale to the Clippers to Steve Ballmer here a few years ago, like these NBA franchises, I mean, even Milwaukee's minority share, what was it, Wes Edens that just got out of there recently, and made all that money. Like, we know that MJ's going to cash out big time. So he definitely won in that regard. But in a way, I'm real conflicted about this, because like I want MJ to be owning an NBA team and to be thriving in a way. You know what I mean? Because he is. He's the greatest basketball player of all time. Like he's one of the faces of the league. It's just one of these things where it's good for everybody, right? Like you want your stars around the league as much as possible. Like I think it's good for the health of the league overall. I also think, of course, like, you know, as in a league, I think that diversity matters. In a majority African-American league, I think having one African-American owner is probably not the best look in the world. And now there could very well be zero, like we said, with MJ bowing out of this. On the other hand, like I said, MJ's been a pretty terrible executive. So like the other part of me is like, hey, the Hornets haven't really seen a ton of success here in Charlotte over the past few years. If you get somebody in there who's really super invested, does the right things to see them prosper, like that would certainly go a long way for the franchise. Like it, you know, you talk about really the past. I mean, seriously, like I'm not. We talked about with the because I feel like I've been beating up on them a little bit recently because we talked about their all-time teams and we talked about the Hornets like by far having the worst. I struggle in the last 20 years. Let's even do 23 since 2000, the turn of the millennium, to think about like what Charlotte's greatest moment was. Like I can think of a few players, like obviously Kemba being number one at the top of that list, but I don't know. Like I would like that franchise hasn't done a lot. So I think maybe new ownership gets that going in the right direction, or we can at least be positive at least. But I don't know. I'm kind of back and forth about it. Chase, what do you think?
I think their biggest moment was when they started putting CLT on their uniforms and all men everywhere going, oh, I finally found it. But the point, I mean, the whole thing though about Charlotte, like you look at some of the things that Michael Jordan does as an owner that like if any other owner were to do it, we would probably be putting them on blast. Like, let's not forget, like Michael Jordan straight up like hit some of his players during games. And I'm thinking to myself, if that was Steve Ballmer or if that was anybody else, like we would be having an outrage. But like I think Michael Jordan as an executive, like sometimes you fail. Obviously, we saw that with baseball. Like he's not good at finding the people who are good at finding people. Like, and that's okay. I think it was great for him to bring basketball back to Charlotte. I hated it when it was just the New Orleans Hornets, and I hated it also when it was the Charlotte Bobcats. So I felt like there was some normalcy that came back in the world when Charlotte became the Hornets. But right now, like Jordan's got to look at this and going, okay, like I know I'm generating money, but why am I not finding talent? Like, why am I not finding the guy who's good at scouting? And I think that's something you start to have to consider.
Well, I think that he's got to deserve credit just for finally going back to the Hornets and getting rid of the Bobcats. Like that alone is at least like a partially successful ownership.
Absolutely.
He should be in the Hall of Fame for that.
Yeah. They have some of the best unis in the league. Like their branding is unbelievable. Like if they have nothing else going for them, they have that.
And they've turned it up too, and they've done it in a good way, which is good. But yeah, he hasn't necessarily made the right decision. He hasn't really helped himself out early on too, right? Like early on, he was going in like, I'm going to do everything and have control over everything. Then he kind of realized he was over his head a little bit. And I think that just set them back a little too far early on, where it was always going to be a tough game to play catch up, you know, where it was just kind of like there was already too little, too late sort of situation. And while he was able to actually turn that franchise around, like as far as value goes, because what the Bobcats was nothing, and bringing him back and turning him into the Hornets and the way that he's grown, just the presence of them and just the marketing of them has definitely been worth something at least. And I think that is due in part because he realized like, hey, if I surround myself with the right people here and can kind of do more. And we've seen that team get a little better over the last few years too. So, I mean, he did go and draft LaMelo Ball. You know, he's got PJ Washington. Like he's put some pieces there recently that are pretty good. And I think that he's kind of started to slowly figure out the ownership role and what he does in that role. And I think he's also kind of realized that maybe it's not as fun because it's not as much of the basketball side of things that he has to be focusing on. And so I think he's kind of like, you know what, I've turned this thing around and going to be able to make a boatload of money off of it. That's kind of probably what he wanted to do when he went in. I think he wanted to own an NBA team, but ultimately, if you're investing in something like an NBA team, you're hoping to sell it one day to make a lot of money off of it. So, I mean, while yes, unsuccessful in a lot of ways, I think also pretty successful from the first time that is it the first time we've ever had a player transition into ownership like that? Because I mean, I might be speaking out of turn on that. I don't know.
At that level,
I think, and it's really impressive the way that he, was able to kind of because he got torched early on too.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
he was being really stubborn about stuff with the way that he thought he could handle everything. But he kind of said, you know what? No, I'm gonna work at this. I'll figure this out. And he did. He has figured it out. And he has done some really good things with Charlotte over the last couple of years and the players that he's brought in and what he's done. But I do think that he's kind of looking around saying, you know what? I think this is someone else can kind of take this to where I've gotten it and maybe take it to the next level.
Well, he'll cash
It's
out.
one of the few. It's one of the few things that like he's had awareness. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like
Oh, you're good.
because everybody knows that how hard-headed Michael Jordan is.
Mhm.
It happened to him as a player. Like even in his day-to-day life, he's incredibly hard-headed and incredibly competitive. But at least he has the self-awareness of going, okay, there's certain things that are a little bit out of my league. I might need to dial it back a little bit. So I think we have to give him some credit on that as well.
Well, and again,
You're
like I
saying,
said,
Kev.
this is a big W from Jordan in a financial perspective. Like he'll for sure win in that regard. Some of the Hornets stuff obviously out of his hands, namely one Miles Bridges. Like I just, look, there's nothing you can do there. It's not really his fault. I'm a little more surprised now. And again, I guess maybe we'll see from the behind the scenes what happened just because like they are so close to Wembanyama potentially. They're right there. You talk about the 4 teams that are in the mix. It's them, it's San Antonio, it's Houston, and it's Detroit. You've already got LaMelo Ball, who I know a little tough the way the season ended with the ankle injury, could very well miss a part of next year too. But Wemby seems like he's got the potential to just turn this whole franchise around, or any franchise around that he goes to, really quick. So I think certainly you would maybe want to see if that happens next year. And then if it doesn't happen, you can cash out. But regardless, like I said, he's going to make a ton of money, which I guess is what all that matters in the grand scheme of when you're doing business and such.
Yeah, he hasn't been doing a lot of successful business stuff lately, has he? I mean,
Yeah, Air Jordan brand. Nobody's ever worn that or seen
Reeboks,
that. Or
baby.
Those sneakers don't sell out or anything. What did you say, CC?
I said sneakers. I wasn't sure what you guys were talking about.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. We appreciate you guys as always. Justin will be back next week. In the meantime, though, Chase Bunker, the reporter over at WOKV in Jacksonville in the afternoon, also the host of Bunker's Burning Hot Take, the podcast. Again, you can find that anywhere you find a podcast, much like us. Chris Crawford, assistant program director up at WSB Radio in Atlanta. Obviously, a huge station up there. Make sure you're tuned into that. Real quick thoughts before we get out of here. CC, I'll start with you because we kind of wobbled for Wemby for a brief second, but I want to give me 30 seconds on the Spurs, and Chase, I'll give you 30 seconds on the Magic, and we can get out of here after that. So CC, I'll start with you.
They're in a perfect position. Keep losing games. Make sure you end up in one of those top 3 spots so they can get Wemby. In the meantime, I don't like Ed Cooley anymore. He's stripped of his Rhode Island status. He is no longer a 401 resident. I will boo him anytime I see him in the future.
Dell's Lemonade is really good. I can confirm that.
It's loyal and delicious.
It is. It's loyal and delicious indeed. Chase, what we got for the Magic? Because I know you're not feeling quite as bitter about your Magic.
After listening to CC talk, you say that lemonade's good, but I feel like the popular drink over there is loyalty. Anyway, the Magic right now, I'm in this weird position where it's like every time I win the game, like, yeah, play it. And then every time they lose, I'm like, woo, Wemby. And so I don't know. I've got bipolar fandom right now. They haven't been performing as well. They just lost to the Lakers. We had Austin Reeves just go off for 35. And it's Austin Reeves is great. Hillbilly Kobe. I'm like, no, he's just a white Carlos Arroyo. That's all he really is. He just got hot for one game. Right now, the Magic are...
He's going to get way too elevated just because he's a Laker. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Austin Reeves is legit a good NBA player. But
he's a slight, who is it? He's a worse Caruso. That's what it is. Caruso got elevated because he was
Caruso's actually good.
Well, now he is, but it took him a while.
I think the Magic should win these. I think winning is important for these young guys. I think with the team and the core they have, yes, getting a guy like Wemby's great, but at this point you're out of that contention. You might as well go for it, play these games and not worry about the lottery, because there's plenty of good guys in there. And the difference between picking 7th and 10th or 6th and 9th, I don't think there's a huge difference this year in the draft. And Franz and Paolo, these young guys, get them their wins. It's the one thing that this Magic young core has always never gotten is wins.
You're right. But here's the thing, though, is that they are 5 games out from the 10 seed, and they still have the Pacers and the Wizards above them. Chicago right now has the 10 seed. And it's like, you look at that and it's like, okay, how can you do it with as many without like what would we say, like 10, 11 games left? Like,
yeah, you can, but you're not going to catch them, but you're a good bat at least. You know what I mean? Because you already have your guy. Like, you're not floating where you don't have enough. Like, Paulo to me looks like a superstar. I mean, hell, Franz isn't like too far behind. I don't think he's quite the ace that Paulo is, but like, they're bad enough. And the reality too is with the Bulls pick, like, you've got a double whammy potentially where you could move up as well. I don't know, like, it because it's tough. You're right. A part of me is like, get as much talent as possible. If Orlando has Wemby and Banchero, it's like, oh my God, look out immediately. But I also do think you guys have enough already where, you know, you just can kind of win games and it's not really a detriment. Because like CC said, you're going to be able to get a high value player anywhere in the high lottery. And again, with that Bulls pick, could always package it and move up a little higher. Like, you're not going to be able to pry one this year, obviously, but maybe for
get
2 and 3. Like, Brandon Miller's stock's been rising. Like, I know obviously off the court issues there with when we got to see what happens with all that. But like, he's somebody who's been going up the boards. Like, Scoot Henderson is still there. So there's definitely a lot of talent. Like I said,
or we're probably going to get Grady Dick. Like, let's be honest. Like, that's what it's going to end up being, is we're going to get on that train and we're going to go and get Grady Dick.
Well, Lord knows you'll have more fun with those, making those jokes than anybody. So if anything, I would at least hope you get that as a gift. Thank you guys again for tuning into the podcast, and we will see you guys next week.